The car you see behind me is of course the brand new Mercedes C-Class, but under that hood is not a petrol engine, it's a diesel. We've been waiting for this for a while, and now, just to keep it honest, we've also brought along its arch rival. It's the BMW 3 Series, which until now was our pick for best in the class. Let's put them head to head and see which one comes out on top. Now, looks can be subjective, and to each their own. But you have to admit there's something special about the new C-Class. The mini S-Class styling is all curves and creases, and it manages to look elegant and modern at the same time. The BMW, on the other hand, is pure sports sedan. Our car has a bunch of M Sport add-ons that might be a bit over the top, but even without them, it's an aggressive looking thing. The long bonnet and short tail just remind you of the performance it promises. Which you prefer is up to you, but for many buyers, it's what's on the inside that counts more. Step inside the new C-Class and you will be blown away by what you see and feel. The cabin is truly the highlight of this car, with quality materials and a design that just leagues ahead of anything else in this class. It really feels like a mini S-Class in here, and that's because a lot of parts have actually been borrowed from that car. It's really saying something. Mercedes has just gone to town with the interior of this car. The quality of the wood, metal and leather is exquisite, and the attention to detail is sublime. In this imported C220 CDI Sport trim, it's rather well equipped too. You get a high-res 7-inch screen, a touchpad for the command computer, satellite navigation, a panoramic sunroof, and even a 2-pin plug point in the back seat. You should know, however, that some equipment, like the 13-speaker Burmester Hi-Fi audio system, has been removed for the final India spec car. We also found the dials looked a bit ordinary in contrast to the rest of the interior. Nevertheless, this cabin will still wow you with its sense of occasion, and there's no shortage of that. After the C-Class, the 3 Series cabin looks decidedly plain. It's not just the all-black color scheme, you can have it in beige with a classy wood trim too. But it's just that the design looks a bit too similar to every other BMW. And, while the quality of materials is in no way bad, it just isn't as good as what you get in the Mercedes. And it just doesn't feel as special. As is often the case with BMWs though, the real magic happens when you go for a drive. So this is the BMW 3 Series, the 320d, which has thus far been our pick of this segment. And there's a good reason we picked it as our favorite. It's got a lovely blend of great driving dynamics, good comfort, and a decent amount of luxury as well. Under the hood of this 320d is a 181 horsepower 4-cylinder diesel engine. And it's got a lot of punch, but it has to be said, its power delivery is a little bit peaky. What that means is this motor is quite rev happy, and power comes in a strong burst rather than a linear surge, which makes it a little tricky to modulate in traffic. The upshot, however, is that when you put your foot down, you get a lot of performance out of this engine and makes it great fun to drive hard. The other thing you should know about this 2-litre BMW motor is that it's not the most refined unit out there. Be it at idle or when you're revving it, there's always a rather gruff sounding noise coming from the front. This Mercedes engine isn't usually the most refined either, but you can tell that a big effort has been made so that you hear very little of it inside the cabin. It's much better than the old C-Class. Now the motor under the hood of this diesel C-Class is a familiar one. It's the 220 CDI, and if you're familiar with Mercs, that means it's the middle of the range version of the company's 2.1-litre 4-cylinder diesel engine. Now that means it produces 168 horsepower and 40.8 kgm of torque, which is quite substantial. The thing you need to know about this engine, however, is that it works best when driven in a leisurely manner. It has a powerful bottom end and a tough mid-range, but extended beyond that and it starts to feel and sound very strained. What's more, push it too hard and the gearbox too starts to slip up. Speaking of which, this gearbox isn't quite as quick or intuitive as the BMW's one, but in everyday driving it will get the job done just fine. And speaking of that gearbox, now an area where the BMW definitely scores over the Mercedes is in its gearbox. The 8-speed ZF automatic is one of the best in the business, and it shifts smoothly, seamlessly and really quick. It's also very intuitive and senses exactly what you want from it as you want it from it. Now when it comes to handling, things get a little bit unusual. BMWs are always known to be great driver's cars. This one is too, but there's a strange looseness around the straight ahead position when you're going really fast, which is quite unbecoming of a BMW. That said, however, the chassis is very well balanced and it is still a lot of fun to chuck around corners when you're really going for it. But to eke the best out of the 320D, you have to really push it quite hard. On the other hand, the C-Class, amazingly, is a lot easier to have fun with. Now, Mercedes has fit this car with a very quick and very accurate steering, which is quite a pleasure when you're going up a mountain road, for example. The car feels very light and agile and really eager to dart into corners. It is of course helped by the taut new chassis and the firm suspension, but then that does have its downside. Now if there's one thing that's not quite resolved with this car, it's the suspension. The old C-Class was a prime example of a fine riding and handling car, and this one is a little short of that mark. You see, Mercedes has raised the car for India and in doing so has stiffened up the suspension quite a bit. While that translates into superb rock-solid stability out on the highway, it does also mean that the car skips and bounces around a little bit over bumps and undulations, which is a shame really. This latest 3 Series is quite softly sprung, unlike BMWs of old. What that means is that when you're going quickly on the highway in a straight line, it's not too bad, it stays quite flat. However, show it a bunch of corners and drive it hard and it does roll around quite a bit. Not what you could have said of the old 3 Series. Overall, however, we would say the 3 Series has the better ride of the two. It may thunk through sharper bumps, but it's more comfortable over a variety of speeds than the Merc. But crucially, it has a more comfortable back seat than the C-Class. It's set a bit low, but once you're in there, it's spacious, supportive and very comfortable. Not all things you can say about the Mercs back then. While the C-Class has a good amount of knee room, it's a bit tight on headroom and the seat cushioning is rather firm too. Most of all though, it's very short on thigh support, which does hurt comfort on a long drive. Now, picking between these two was never going to be easy. They both have a lot of things in common, but yet they are quite different from one another. The BMW manages to win our hearts for being fun to drive and yet comfortable and spacious all the same. And the interior isn't quite as good as what Mercedes has managed to deliver with the C-Class. Speaking of which, the C-Class interior is its absolute highlight. It's fantastically luxurious, very well equipped, and a fantastic place to be. However, all this comes at a bit of a price since the C-Class is a CBU import at the moment. The backseat experience isn't quite as good as the BMW's and neither is the ride comfort. But just for the supreme experience of luxury that this car delivers, even at its slightly premium pricing, we think is what customers will prefer, and it has finally managed to slightly edge ahead of the BMW in this comparison.